Hi, everyone. So excited to see you all here. It looks like we have a critical mass here, so I think we're going to get started. So, yeah, thank you. I know we've been facing some really serious and heartbreaking challenges right now in the world, but right now I wanted to orient us towards what's hopeful. So I see a lot of you putting in the chat what you're hopeful about right now. Hopeful about the voice of the oceans expedition. That's exciting. Let's see. Hopeful we can start making, from Scott Hammer, some serious impacts, progress on the ocean plastics with awesome leaders on this call. Love that. Yarrow, usually beautiful, sadly very smoky in the west right now, hopeful for the plastics treaty. We have people from DC, from New York, from UK. Happy to see that they could still make the Olympics happen in this challenging time, showing we can overcome adversity. I love that. Hopeful about the massive technological shift to clean energy and advanced materials. Thanks, Noah. Yeah, that's great. I'm also hopeful. In the West right now, there are wildfires, but I managed again to get to the ocean and kind of breathe in that salt air and really reconnect to where I am in the world. And I think that's really helpful. So it's really I'm glad to see everyone can orient towards that. And so, and it's really awesome to see you all here today. And we want to thank you for taking the time to be here. And I also wanted to ask you, what are you excited about going into the discussions today? If you could put that in the chat as well. Yeah, what are you excited about? What are you looking forward to today? Sharing different views, to meet new people, tackling a global issue, making new connections, exchanging, being inspired and learning from this group. Looking forward to hearing the view of different people from around the world and the positive spirit of collaboration created by the OPLN. Thanks, Jody. Yeah, learn from other people. I love that. I love orienting towards this kind of mode of listening and understanding. Thinking globally on plastics. Yeah, a lot of people hearing from different perspectives. Connecting solutions and ideas across the solutions spectrum. I like that. That's great. So before we get started, I just want to take care of some housekeeping. So first, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. And right now I'd like you to please rename yourself if you haven't done this already. So you can do this by hovering over your picture, clicking on the 3 dots in the top right corner and selecting rename. And please click on the interpretation at the bottom right of your screen and select the language you speak. And this meeting will be conducted in both English and Portuguese. And if you have any tech issues, please reach out to Seth Bloom, who's on this call in the chat. So you can reach him here, or you can reach him at sbloom@merid.org, and he'll do his best to help you. So thanks, Meredith, for putting that in the chat. So thanks for doing that. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts and experiences and what you're hopeful for about in the chat. I'm Erin McCluskey, and I'm the Managing Director of the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network. And together with World Wildlife Fund and Greenpeace, we'd like to welcome you to the July session of the Global Plastics Treaty Dialogues. And I'd like to acknowledge the members of our Stewardship Council who are on the call today. So from A Plastic Planet, Systemic, Work, and First Mile, they've worked tirelessly behind the scenes to guide the development of today's program. And I'd also like to thank our partners at Meridian Institute who are running the show and who will be leading the breakout group discussions a little later on. So thank you, Meredith, John, Annie, Seth, and countless others for helping us facilitate today's discussions. So we want to cover like what we'll be going through today. So you know, right now, I'm so glad that you all are here, and next we'll be getting into understanding just a little bit about who is here. Let's just get hear from the different people around the room. And then I'll hand it over to Dave Ford, who will give us an overview about the movement towards a treaty, and then conducting a panel, an activist to industry panel on the different stakeholder perspectives. And then we'll be going into breakouts for about 40 minutes, get a 10 to 15 minute break, and then go into the second round of breakouts after that for another 40 to 45 minutes. And then we are honored to be joined by Walter Schultz, who will be giving closing remarks from Ecuador about the upcoming Ministerial Conference. So yes, so now we just want to get a sense of who's here today. You'll get to hear from each other a lot more in the breakouts and of course through the chat, but just to get a glimpse of who's here, we've invited a few of you to introduce yourselves, and we'd like you to say your name, your organization, and what you're curious about going into today's session. So first, I would like to invite Michael Maggio from IWRC. Michael.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Maggio. I'm the president of the Inclusive Waste Recycling Consortium, or as we affectionately call it, IWORK. Today, I'm curious how I and others can participate more hands-on in this momentous undertaking of compiling the thoughts and ideas of such an eclectic group of all the different attendees, all of amazingly different visions, perspectives, strategies, and objectives, and how to compile them into meaningful action. Really excited to be part of this endeavor.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. Next, I'd like to welcome Ralph Chammy from IMF. Is Ralph on right now? Give them a minute.
I'm not seeing Ralph.
Okay, well, we can move on to Berit Gleixner from IKEA.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. My name is Berit. I'm with IKEA, as Erin mentioned, working on social sustainability issues, and I'm joining you from sunny Sweden today. I have a general curiosity about being here today because it's the first meeting that I'm joining. So I'm excited to learn from everyone, and particularly curious to see how we can create synergies between the different topic areas that we're going to be discussing. And because I work on social issues, also how we can embed human rights approaches across all of them. So thank you for inviting me to introduce myself, and looking forward to meeting more of you later during the session.
Great, thank you so much, Berit. So I'd like to bring up next Shruti Singha from Chintan.
Hi, I am actually joining in from India, and this time works for me better personally. I'm still a bit jet lagged because I moved very recently from London, so this time works well for me. But anyway, this is also my first meeting with OPLN, and I'm very curious to know how everybody is and how you work, what you do. But I think I'm particularly curious about how we can balance social justice with sustainability, and how we can really, if we want to ban plastics, how we can really plan the ban. So that's our curiosity as an organization as well. So hi, everybody.
Hi, Shruti. Nice to see you here. Thanks for coming. And next, I would like to welcome Rob Wing from the U.S. Department of State.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Erin. This also is my first meeting of this group, so I'm very excited. I'm Rob Wing. I'm the acting director of the Office of Environmental Quality in the State Department, and I'm very engaged in the discussions leading up to the Ministerial Conference in September, and then towards the UN Environment Assembly meetings in February. And I'm super excited to hear everyone's perspective here and across this broad group of folks that are participating in this call, and especially interested in how we harness this momentum in the global discussions on ways that we combat ocean plastic pollution. So thanks a lot. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Yeah, so grateful for you to be here. And then I think lastly, Ryan Schenicke from Ocean Cycle.
Great, thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ocean Cycle, we are a social enterprise focused on improving lives in coastal communities and reducing ocean plastic through the use of certification and ecosystem management. And I think what we're curious about today is really along the lines of implementation. There's a lot of great initiatives out there, national initiatives, global initiatives around plastic pollution. But I think, as an organization that spends a lot of time on the ground, we often see them fall apart because there's not a lot of focus on the implementation and how things happen at the local level when these things are planned. And so we're really curious how we can not only, hear other perspectives on that, but give our perspective as well as make sure that's integral to the planning. So thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Ryan. And I'd also like to bring up Sonia Diaz from WeGo. Sonia, can you introduce yourself and say who you've brought today to today's session?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Sonia Diaz. I'm WeGo's global waste specialist from WeGo Women in Informal Employment Globalizing and Organizing. As we had discussed in the first dialogue, the relevance of reclaimers as frontliners in the fight against plastic pollution. Aware of that, we are facilitating the participation of reclaimers from the National Movement of Reclaimers of Brazil. And we have with us today two reclaimers, Madalena Duarte. She is a national leader and also one of the coordinators of WeGo's and the National Movement of Reclaimers Gender and Waste Project. So she's representing the project and the national movement here. We also have Gilberto Chagas, who is also a national leader from the national movement. And in addition to that, we have two other people, Professor Emilia Rutkowski, who is part of a network that we belong to, the Observatory for Inclusive Recycling, and also my assistant, Juliana Gonçalves, who is here to assist us with the reclaimers' needs. Yeah, thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Sonia. And I really appreciate all of the work that you've done. You really answered the call from the March dialogues that it was very important to have the participation of more waste reclaimers. So we're grateful to be joined by Madalena and Gil today. So thank you. So we're also honored to hear from Richardson Antoine, the impact manager of First Mile Haiti. He sent us an important reminder as we go into these discussions. So we'll cue that video.
Hi, my name is Richardson Antoine. I am the impact manager for the First Mile Haiti. I would like to give a warm welcome to all of the business leaders, activists, and innovators involved in the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network topics for the UN Treaty on Plastic. From all that we're all seeing happening in the world, unexpected flooding, fire outbreak, and the climate change are some examples of how the environment is trying to talk to us. I believe that the environment has never been so communicative. It wants us to act, and the time to act is now. We're already late, but it's not too late. While we're looking for solution at this conference, there are millions of people that are working hard, collecting, processing waste in order to make a living. In Haiti, collecting is nonstop. I know women waking up early with a headlight, going to the landfill at night, just to collect enough plastic just to make a living to put food on the table for their children. During this conference, I urge you to remember them, to know that they are doing a great work, and to consider, not only consider, but involve them, their feedback and their ideas. While there are many stakeholders around the table, they are often the least represented. So I encourage you to think about these people, to be really direct and candid in your communication with one another, to be honest and bring your passion for the cause. The time is now, and this decade will decide whether we will solve the problem or not. And we can solve it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richardson. That's a great message as we head into our discussions, really grounding us in the reality of millions in the informal waste sector who are on the front lines of this crisis, and just how crucial their voices are in solving it. So I'll see you a little bit later, but now I would like to introduce the founder of the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network, Dave Ford, who will be leading us through where we are in the treaty process right now. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We're so delighted to have you, to see almost 170 people in the middle of the summer join us for the second sessions this year of the Global Treaty Dialogues. I think out of the gate, want to tell you a little bit about the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network for those of you that are new. We are 110 plus activists to industry organization dedicated to solving the plastic crisis. And all of you are here because you're interested in figuring out how a global treaty can address this crisis. And many of you have already made public statements in support of a treaty. So it's really important for us to ground into who we are and exactly what this is, because we have stakeholders from all over the map. So the OPLN is a network rather than a coalition. And we're bringing together people that are coming from very, very different perspectives. The goal is not to achieve consensus, but understanding and hopefully new ideas and collaborations. Greenpeace and World Wildlife Fund are playing a major role in helping us at the OPLN produce an effective and inclusive series of dialogues, but their involvement does not imply partnership with all the participants or endorsement of all the proposals discussed or outputs shared. The OPLN views constructive tension, even among parties with views that can seem diametrically opposed, as a real key to progress. And I think it's just really important that what we root into what we're not here to do, and be very clear out of the gate. We are not here to enter into any pre-negotiations or infringe in any way on the UNEP treaty process. That is being handled in the United Nations. They have a process and they do an amazing job, and they're hard at work, and we're going to find out more about some of the initiatives happening there in the formal process today. We're not going to be building a consensus statement. We're not going to be building any sort of collective position. If you scroll through the participant list, you'll see that that's just not going to be possible. And I'm also would like to take this opportunity again, if you could click on your picture and rename yourself so we know where everybody is coming from and the organizations that you're a part of. It'll just really help everybody in the room understand just how vast of a group we have here today together. What we are here to do, we are here to meet people from organizations that we don't normally engage with. We're here to ride our edges productively and ideally to break records with respect to what it takes to bring forth an effective treaty. Now, and lastly, we are here to make sure that all voices are heard. Now, the OPLN's North Star is education. This is what we're all about. And this is how we were built as an organization or organically. And we believe to understand and solve these issues, stakeholders across the spectrum need to build something that we call environmental intelligence. And there are three core components of EQ. Now, the first component is what we call experiential intelligence. And that's when you experience a crisis firsthand. It sticks with you, you never forget it. And a lot of times the bonds that you form with people when you're in these experiences can last a lifetime. Now, the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network was born in such an experience. In May of 2019, we took 165 leaders into the middle of the Atlantic Gyre, 500 miles off the coast of Bermuda. And we had 165 leaders, activists, and industry. We were all stuck on a boat together for 4 days, snorkeling in the ocean, in the open ocean with 2 miles of water below us, pulling handfuls of plastic waste. It was a powerful experience. And so many of you that are with us today on this call were with us out in the Atlantic garbage patch. And we really just can't stress, and so many of you have experienced this, whether it be through immersions in the global South or even immersions with other issues, is that we're so excited to get back out there again and for COVID to allow us to do so. And we have a lot of plans in 2022 to do just that. So the second component of environmental intelligence is positional education or positional intelligence. And that's what we're doing here today. That's when you can sit across from organizations that you don't agree with, that in some case, again, you're diametrically opposed with, and you can learn their positions. And a lot of times we found that your positions might be closer than you previously thought. In some cases, not. In some cases, there are going to be hard lines in the sand. But there's a lot of movement that's happening around the world, and positions change. And the amount of change that we've seen in the last 2 years, 5 years, has been significant with respect to the environmental crisis that we're facing, for good reason, because they have to, because we are all in this together. And lastly, the third component is what we call factual intelligence. And facts are always changing because we're always getting new science. And environmental facts and environmental issues, there's always a changing. And it's important to consistently educate. We've actually built a platform which we call SALT, Sustainable Action Leadership Training, to help stakeholders, wide groups, get the 101s about ocean plastics and climate change and deforestation, so that we can all be speaking the same language about what the facts are. I mean, right now we're teaching that there's 11 million metric tons of plastic entering our ocean. And we know that that fact is not correct. That data, which is the best data we have, is pre-COVID, pre-masks, pre the incredible stresses on our waste systems globally. But we understand that we're going to continue to get new information, and it's with that spirit that we move forward. So the reason that we're here today is because this issue is a complicated, chaotic mess, and we're not even close to solving it. While there is a tremendous amount of hope, this is what we call our chaos map. This slide is supposed to induce stress. I'm going to go through it quickly, but there's 193 countries that are recognized by the UN that are all looking really hard at this challenge right now. Depending on who you're talking to, 100 to 140 are in favor of some sort of global treaty or global instrument to address this. You have a solution spectrum from EPR to alternative materials to advanced recycling to plastic offsets to reuse and refill. Many of these solutions are landmines that a lot of the organizations on this call right now are vehemently in disagreement about, right? But they all are solutions in their own right. We have a financial sector that's putting pressure through ESG metrics on the plastic value chain to do the right thing, yet shareholder metrics and shareholder value still rules the day. And a lot of times the companies that are represented on this call can't do the things they'd like to because they're beholden to shareholder value metrics. We have advocacy and trade groups. We have universities that are putting out incredible research year after year. We have NGOs across the spectrum, from the Break Free from Plastic movement to NGOs that work directly with the plastic value chain. We have a highly confused consumer right now that's only recycling 10 to 14% globally. And lastly, as we've heard from Sonia and Richardson today, millions and millions of waste reclaimers, waste collectors in the global South that are the last line of defense between plastics and the ocean. So it's in that spirit that we come together to try to help make this less chaotic. And in March, we came together, we had two days, 2 time zones, 230 attendees, 140 organizations, and 30 from 34 countries. And I'm so excited to say that the RSVPs that we've gotten for our July sessions, which are happening here and then tonight on Asia Pacific time, exceed this. So the energy and the appetite to learn from a treaty has just been incredible. We were honored in March to have the president of COP26, Alok Sharma, welcome us. Peter Thompson, the UN Special General Envoy to the Ocean, gave us welcoming remarks as well. We heard from leaders and experts across the informal sector, from human rights. We had reuse and refill specialists, scientists, secondary market specialists, people focused on recycling, health, EPR, reporting, climate, corporate affairs, and policy. And we got so many different perspectives and so many different angles. And it's incredible that so many of those representatives and even more are with us today. So I do want to root in a little bit to what is happening from a very, very big picture at the global level, like where the treaty stands right now. So depending on who you're talking to, 100 to 140 countries are in favor of a global agreement. There are a lot of countries that are still in consideration, and there are some challenges. I would, if I was to lump together like a group of countries where there is challenges, it would be countries that have a high percentage of their gross domestic product in petro. So petrostates in the Middle East and other places. I don't want to call out any countries by name, but for obvious economic reasons, a plastic treaty could be difficult for them. There's a Ministerial Conference that is being led by the Germans, by the Ghanaians, the Vietnamese, and the Ecuadorians. This is the official UNEA process where they're trying to figure out right now a mandate that is going to be decided upon at UNEA 5.2 in February. And right now at these conferences, the governments are largely trying to figure out two big things, like how binding is this treaty going to be, or how binding is the starting point for the negotiations, and will it address the full plastic life cycle, or will it be marine debris specific? And again, in February is where the decision is going to be made of whether to actually start negotiating a treaty. So there's a lot of work to do. And we're so grateful. We're going to be joined by Mr. Walter Schold, who is leading this initiative from the Ecuadorian government, and he's going to be speaking with us later today. I think one of the things that's really important to put out there is that with the COVID-19 Delta variant, there is a lot of, I would say, there's not consensus yet about whether UNEA 5.2 is actually going to happen in February. Right now, the vaccination rate in Africa is about 3%. I think there's a lot of hope that it will happen, but the formal decision, from what we're being told, is going to happen in September. We've also heard from a lot of governments and a lot of stakeholders is that right now they're not exactly sure how something like this could happen online. So we just want to throw that out there, and as something that's a real consideration, and certainly we're very hopeful that it will happen, and more information will be coming soon. Lastly, there's a draft resolution that just came out, and Rwanda and Peru led this process with a like-minded drafting group. I don't believe this is public yet. The like-minded drafting group includes the EU, Norway, Costa Rica, Seychelles, Senegal, and Switzerland. And it really builds the legal foundation for the eventual negotiation to include the full life cycle of plastics. So that is essentially sort of like, from our understanding, like the bedrock of this resolution that is still being disseminated. So it was with my pleasure and real excitement that organically, out of what we've done in March, we are so excited to introduce the Global Plastics Treaty Country Dialogues. And again, this emerged organically. And one of the major challenges from the Paris Agreement is that the national action plans didn't really start to take shape in a lot of countries until after the agreement was signed. And we've heard in some cases, like 2 years after Paris was signed, some countries were still hiring consultants to write their national action plans. And we had the opportunity to do something really different with this treaty. And remember, like with this treaty, from everything that we heard, the treaty text is going to be relatively thin, and the meat of what's going to be happening is going to be in the national action plans, which could be hundreds of pages in some cases. We have just received funding for the first 3 country dialogues, and we're going to replicate this model that you're experiencing today and that you experienced in March and that you'll experience through the continuation of this year in South Africa, in Chile, and Malaysia. And they're going to be run in local languages so that we can start building capacity at the country level. And again, it's going to be activist to industry. It's going to allow stakeholders to learn from each other, in the spirit of positional education. And it's really going to be a bottom-up approach to complement these sort of top-down international meetings that we've been running. We're going to be doing three meetings and a report. So like starting just like we did in March, setting the foundation, then diving into tensions and opportunity mapping, kind of just like we're going to be doing today. And then narrative crafting and kind of building certainly like taking everything we learned in those first 2 meetings and sort of coalescing around what the real challenges from all sides are in each of these countries. And then we're going to be publishing a report and a media piece. And we're being extremely ambitious, and it's our goal to host these in 70 countries around the world. And again, to take the output from these meetings and make it available to everyone that's participating. So lastly, I want to get into what we're talking about today. There are vastly differing views on all the issues that we're going to be talking about today. And I want to talk about the 5 main points. And John Ehrman from Meridian Institute will kind of get into this a little bit deeper. Our panel coming up, we're going to talk about this as well. But we're going to be talking today specifically and organizing the breakout groups around finance and infrastructure, market development and business regulation, climate, health, and human rights and environmental justice. So we're getting into the sticky spots. After the last meeting in March, this is what came back in all the feedback forums. Like everyone was very, really incredible response about what we did in March, but it's time to roll up our sleeves and to start putting different viewpoints on the table. So we want to surface opinions from different stakeholder group, and mostly importantly, we want to make sure that your voice is heard. And we believe that the tension equals progress for sure. And as Aaron mentioned in the opening, there's a human element to this, a unique human element. And we want you to authentically represent yourself today. But there's also a certain nuance when we enter this together as humans, as opposed to just the organizations that we represent. So even when we disagree, these dialogues can be really productive. And the plan at the end of today's meetings and tonight's meetings or tomorrow morning in APAC is to write a report from this exercise today that's going to represent the different views from the different stakeholders that we'll be able to surface to just generally, educate the entire stakeholder spectrum of where everyone sits. So with that, I am very, very excited to kick off our panel today. And I'd like to introduce Aaron Simon from the World Wildlife Fund, John Hocevar from Greenpeace, and Jody Roussel from Nestle. This is an activist to industry panel right now. And welcome everyone. And it would be amazing if you guys could introduce yourselves. Aaron, do you wanna get started?
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Simon. I'm the head of plastic waste and business here at World Wildlife Fund. I have met many of you, but I'm excited to have a number of new faces and voices joining this conversation. My role at World Wildlife Fund is to really engage businesses to help them to think about how they can essentially rethink their relationship with materials, sourcing, design, and then recovery of them in a variety of different efficient ways. And so, and that is often about connecting them to collective action in the system that they share with one another to make sure that we're being responsible stewards of the resources we're taking from the planet, and then making sure they don't end up in nature and negatively impact species, ecosystems, and communities. So excited to be here, excited to be speaking with John and Jody and Dave about some of the opportunities. So thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Jody, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Jody Roussel with Global Public Affairs at Nestle, where I manage packaging and sustainability. Very happy to join the panel today and all of you for this discussion. I really enjoyed the discussions in March. My role at Nestle is covering engagement with our stakeholders externally, as well as working on our long-term outlook and supporting our operational teams in developing new strategies to reduce the impact of packaging. My colleagues manage our commitment to net zero for 2050, covering our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And so our work in packaging is looking to respond to all the commitments that the company is making, whether it's with stakeholder communities or in regards to the climate, or our longer term vision to make sure that none of our packaging ends up in the environment as litter or as waste in landfills.
Thanks, Jody. Appreciate it. John Hocevar.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, all. Nice to see you. So my name is John Hocevar. I'm the Oceans Campaign Director for Greenpeace USA. I oversee our work on plastic, sanctuaries, fisheries, and deep sea mining. And our global work on plastic is coordinated by the US office, and that's a major priority for Greenpeace.
Thanks so much, John. So first of all, thanks to everyone. Thanks for we're excited to really kind of dive into what we're going to be talking about today. And we also really want to set the stage for this to be an interactive experience. So if you have questions, please let's keep this chat rolling. We're going to be picking from them as we go. We might not be able to pick all of your questions, but if there's something that sparks a question, throw it out there. We'll come back to it at the end. Meredith, thanks again for sort of guiding us in the chat here. And if there's anything, direct message me if there's a certain question that we should put on the, we should elevate right out of the gate. But so maybe we should start off and maybe we can go around, and I think if each of you could kind of give like a POV on some of the sticky spots that we're going to be talking about today. And, so we're going to be talking about market development and business regulations and climate, health, human rights, and finance. Let's just like go around the horn. And again, in the chat, if you have everybody that's a part of this, please surface your thoughts as we go. Aaron Simon, can you talk a little bit about market development, business regulations, and sort of how that intersects with the treaty?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think business holds this immense influence in the fight against plastic pollution, right? If we're going to be successful to getting to a point where we are better stewards of these resources, where plastics are not ending up in nature, impacting communities and ecosystems and species, we need to have businesses be a part of that, right? And what we've seen is that, however, despite the doubling of voluntary plastic waste initiatives from corporations over the last few years, we still have plastic pollution just growing, right? And so we know businesses have responsibility to address the challenge of plastic pollution within their own supply chains. Unfortunately, these voluntary initiatives often sort of lack sufficient support and scale to drive this meaningful systems change, as well as the lack of really basic harmonized data at global, national business levels that limits the ability to monitor the progress and make sure that we're being effective in the measures that we're doing. And so what we need to do is create better enabling conditions that allow the initiatives to be more successful. And that's where I think this international agreement can really come in and help to fill the gap. A UN treaty would help coordinate stakeholder actions and solve the global plastic pollution crisis at scale. It could help us to address the challenges that stem from this transboundary nature of supply chains and waste streams. And not only could a global treaty support a healthy planet, it could support business as well, right? There's mutual benefit there. In this day and age, many companies are facing increased reputational risk as more and more consumers demand effective responses from businesses across the plastic value chain. Moreover, investors are expecting firms to manage their plastic footprint responsibly, and regulators are promoting policies and legislation. So I think that companies coming in support, endorsing a UN treaty on plastic pollution, they're taking a powerful stance that aligns with the trajectory that our society is really driving for. And I'm really excited about this year, right? We're going to embark on crafting a global treaty on plastics, the first of its kind. And it's one that will fill a necessary void that will help give business the structure needed to sort of implement that large scale change that we're looking to do.
Thanks, Aaron. And we're going to come back and dive in even deeper in a little bit with Jody about how the sort of business regulation intersects with the business sector, specifically some of the stuff that Jody's working on at Nestle. But let's move around the horn. John, can you talk a little bit about health and where we sit in the world with respect to that and how that could be and why we're talking about that today?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. I think most of us share our view that we need an ambitious binding global treaty to keep plastic out of nature. That really isn't too controversial, hopefully. But I think most of us in the environmental community and and quite a bit beyond feel that it also has to address the full life cycle of plastic in order to cover other impacts of plastic pollution, including human health, as well as climate change and environmental justice. And it is great to see everyone here. But of course, the corporations and governments participating in these dialogues have the power right now to eliminate a very large part of our plastic pollution problem. There's no need to wait for a treaty. Getting serious today about shifting away from single-use plastic and throwaway packaging in general to reusable and package-free approaches is going to be a lot easier to manage than if you wait until it's required by laws or treaties. It's encouraging that we're all here, even before the UN has begun negotiating. It's important that we try to work together, because the more we find common ground, the more we're able to accomplish. Thinking about some of the successful treaties in the past have proven that we can act quickly when we want to. Scientists first published their discovery in May 1985 that our use of CFCs was creating a massive hole in the ozone layer. And if we didn't do something, it was going to be bad. Just over 2 years later, the Montreal Protocol was adopted, banning most uses of CFCs. DDT presents a more cautionary tale. In 1948, the creator of DDT was awarded the Nobel Prize. It took 20 years for scientists to begin to understand the implications of DDT's effects, not just on mosquitoes, but all living things, including humans. Rachel Carson sounded the alarm in 1968 with Silent Spring, but it took another 36 years before the Stockholm Convention finally banned DDT. And that delay was disastrous for wildlife, with species such as bald eagles, golden eagles, and white pelicans driven to the brink of extinction. And like plastic, DDT is very long lasting, so its chemicals are still killing wildlife today, long after it's been banned. And you can see the parallels with plastic. The first scientific publication documenting impacts on wildlife was in the 60s, when they found plastic in the stomachs of 74 of 100 albatross chicks that died before they learned to fly. And there are segments of industry that lobbied against all of these treaties, claiming that their products are beneficial for the environment and that banning or restricting them would do more harm than good. That might sound familiar. It's good to see the ACC coming out in support of a treaty this year. But if it wasn't for opposition from the petrochemical lobby, we would already be into our second year of negotiations. And again, this delay costs lives and further harms ecological systems that are already approaching breaking point. 2 years ago, I spoke to a senior executive from Exxon, and I asked if they thought of themselves as an energy company or an oil and gas company. He said they're an oil and gas company. That's what they're good at, so that's what they're going to stick with. Jumping ahead just 5 years, Exxon lost over $22 billion last year, and were dropped from the Dow, which said it wanted to add new types of businesses that better reflect the American economy. So ultimately, these are the questions that we all have to answer. How are we going to respond to change that's most assuredly coming? Can we position ourselves as leaders, or at least constructive forces? How can we start adapting now in ways that will set us up for success down the road? Your friendly NGOs are happy to help you figure these things out.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. So I think, Jody, can we get into finance, and we could talk about market development from your perspective as well. Would love to kind of just hear how Nestle's thinking about a global treaty.
Thanks, Dave. I mean, it's a lot to talk about, to be given license to address both finance and market development. I think that we're looking today at a systemic problem, and we need to work together to build systemic solutions. And that's one of the reasons that Nestle and that I really appreciate the work that OPLN is doing, bringing this unconventional dialogue together online to accommodate our COVID situations. We're looking at the role that regulations at the national level can play, because regulations are the basis for solid business practices that respect people and respect the planet. The comment that John had made about the opportunity for everyone to come together and share their own views, I think is one that we also share. It's really important to have this type of dialogue. When we look at the opportunity that regulation can create, it can eliminate the opportunity for externalities like environmental pollution. And in the absence of strong national regulations, we see situations like we're faced today, where we have environmental pollution, and we can't blame consumers, we can't blame individuals for not having better options. If we look at the business case and why Nestle is advocating for a strong global treaty and what we're looking at, part of it is about the role of national policy that I was mentioning. It's about setting the framework, it's about creating investment conditions, it's about clear long-term policies that give guidance to investors and that reduce risk. It's also about roadmaps to identify what are volumes of recyclables or what are volumes of waste out there to be collected, and how can we create opportunities, from opportunities for waste reclaimers who are working on the individual level, for opportunities for small businesses, and for larger businesses that are providing recycling or reuse or reverse logistics services. So we need national policy to send signals to business and investors about where the long-term opportunities are, because that's going to de-risk investment in reuse systems and in recycling systems, as well as in collection systems that can fairly represent the interests of waste reclaimers, as well as all different types of businesses. If we look at the policy structure and where the opportunities are, we see some governments acting in a very proactive way. France has a target to phase out single-use plastics by 2040. They're sending a long-term signal, as well as some short-term targets on bulk reuse and refill. We have the EU Commission, who's announced the aim to increase plastic recycling, and as well, all plastic packaging needs to be reusable or recyclable by 2030. So the single-use plastic directive today may be receiving a lot of attention because of the banning of plastic straws, for example, but longer term, the requirement that all plastics need to be recyclable is going to create an industry, and it's also going to create job opportunities locally in collection, in sorting, in logistics, in refill and reuse, as well as in recycling. And so when we look at the opportunities for market development, we see the opportunities for the circular economy as substantial, but it's important to remember the circular economy is not our end goal. The circular economy is what's going to get us to the point where none of the waste is ending up in nature as litter. And secondly, where we're able to neutralize the carbon impact of packaging on the environment.
Thanks so much, Jody. Really appreciate it. I think this question just came in from Amy Clark from Tribe Impact Capital, and I'm just going to go right to it, and maybe we can all go around the horn and just sort of talk about it. So, how can we ensure that any treaty is not undermined by lobbying firms and the very companies that say they are supportive? We've seen this with oil and gas and the Paris Agreement, informed local and national regulations that have come in since. We need to learn the right lesson here, so that often the right and left hands of corporates aren't necessarily on the same page. There is a huge role here for investors to ensure no duplicity, but I'm curious what the panel thinks. So what does the panel think? Jody, you want to go first, and then we can pass it to John and Aaron?
Absolutely. I see some eager smiles from John and Aaron. I think, Amy, to your question, one of the ways that we can ensure that certain industry groups don't have the only view that's expressed is through multi-stakeholder dialogues, like this one at the global level, with the reports and communications that are coming out about the diversity of views, but also at the national level. We very much support what OPLN is doing, launching the national dialogues and coalescing groups of interested parties who want to work on whether that become a national position, a needs statement, or even a future action plan for every country. And that brings everyone together, from advocates to academics, from the media and researchers and scientists to industry of all different scales.
Awesome. Thank you, Jody. Aaron, got any thoughts?
You know, I absolutely agree with Jody. We've kind of moved into an interesting wave of momentum around multi-stakeholder action and the plastic waste crisis that we haven't seen really before on global issues, which has led to a lot more progress than we have, than we've made on others. That gives me optimism that we can, that makes me optimistic that we can move forward a bit more effectively. But I do think it's important to, have these dialogues and show where we are closer together than we are farther apart, so that we do not have these disparate activities that are confusing lawmakers and therefore making us have much more, piecemealed approaches. One of the things we've been trying to focus on in the US is is trying to is showcase how all these different groups who are now moving into being more supportive of EPR, how that we're more aligned than we are not, by coming together and saying, businesses from all across the value chain, and NGOs are in support of not only EPR, but environmental justice in the US, standing up as a global leader. And I think that that's different than we've seen in the past. I'm not saying that's going to guarantee that we are not going to have organizations lobbying against this. But I do feel like we are better situated. And I think there is a better understanding that we need to have that collective approach, that we need to show these unlikely alignments, that the tensions that are brought up in the OPLN dialogues are important for us to be transparent about in that. And that's going to get us a step closer than we have been in the past. So it definitely gives me much more hope.
Thank you so much, Erin. John, the left and right hands of corporations. What are your thoughts on the question?
Great points, Erin and Jody. I think whether it's OPLN or governments or the UN, the best way to help address this is going to be ensuring that these processes are as transparent and as inclusive as possible. One thing that we have in our favor here is that there is so much public engagement and concern around this issue that there are very, very few companies that are still willing to actively oppose the kinds of changes that we need. Where we see that opposition is largely from trade associations. So I would say for many of the corporations on this call, it'll be really important for you to work with any trade associations that you belong to make sure that they're actually representing you. And if they aren't, you should rethink whether you want to be a member.
Copy that, John. Thanks. I think it's pretty interesting. Sean Sutherland from A Plastic Planet on our stewardship council. I feel like we always talk about these international legal movements, the ecocide movement, where definitions have just been aligned to really elevate environmental crimes on the level of war crimes. Where this is a movement that's going to be taking shape in the next 5-10 years. So the first rights of nature laws, where 14 governments right now recognize the rights of nature to actually sue. So a river can sue, usually on behalf of indigenous cultures. So there's a lot of things that are happening, a lot of leverage points. And so I just think it's there's all these different levels, and certainly ESG levers that are corporate boards are thinking about every day, where there's really significant leverage for corporations to do the right thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I want to keep moving too. So thank you for that question, Amy Clark. Really appreciate it. And Sean, if you could drop that ecocide definition into the chat, that could be good for folks. Let's talk a little bit about climate, Erin Simon, and where that intersects here.
Yeah, if we want to reach net zero emissions, I think it's just really essential that we tackle the plastic issue, because we know that the plastic crisis and the climate crisis are just linked so much. If global plastic production continues under business as usual, emissions associated with plastic production would reach 15% of the global carbon budget by 2050, and that. And these current emissions factors likely completely underestimate the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions associated with the common practice of open burning of plastic waste. And that's not even to mention the devastating impact that mismanagement of plastic has on biodiversity as it enters the environment that we're not even fully accounting for in these factors. So companies must holistically manage this linkage with an understanding of how these two issues really influence each other, and and really noting, like every other environmental issue, that a unilateral focus on just one or the other could really negatively impact each other. And so it's an important thing for us to note, and an important part of this conversation. I think that institutional investors and the public are also increasingly demanding that companies address both of these issues transparently, meaningfully, credibly. And in many cases, you hear companies listening, they're interested, they're trying to do that. And so despite all this, though, even where companies have set strong goals to incorporate more recycled content into their products, they often lack the resources and infrastructure to achieve these goals. And so I think this is where an international agreement, once again, on plastics could help, right? An agreement at this scale could help drive necessary innovation, vital infrastructure development, while supporting the development of harmonized standards and common metrics around measuring that linkage and the methodologies, and then allowing us to have global and national targets for us all to be sort of rolling up into. At the end of the day, both plastic waste and the climate have been receiving notable attention from both the public and corporate stakeholders in the last years. And so by embracing a global treaty, I think we have the opportunity to merge where we can have mutual benefits to that and help allow that to be instrumental in solving both crises at once and not working against each other.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. And I want to make sure we hit all of our issues. John, human rights and environmental justice are very central to what we're going to be talking about today. Can you sort of weigh in on why as a stewardship council we chose that?
Sure. I think it's critical for the treaty to address human rights and environmental justice. From extraction, which tends to have enormous impacts on poor communities in particular, often communities of color, to refinement and actually creating plastics. Those facilities tend not to be in the nicest part of town, and we see the health impacts much more severe on the people closest to them, again, often communities of color. And then, there are issues throughout the use, but when we get to disposal, it's often most serious. So you see, whether it's incinerators or landfills, again, tend to be sited in poor communities, particularly communities of color. And there are significant impacts, again, on health and just the community at large. We see whether it's from toxics leaching into the water or blowing into the air or seeping into the soil. It's a serious issue. So I'm happy that this is a part of the conversation today.
Thanks, John. I want to get into some of the questions that are flying through and keep them coming. This is where the magic happens a lot of times. I think looking through here, Robert Goodwin at Ocean Cycle. Thanks, Rob. Talking about general packaging and how much gets recycled these days, and specifically getting into, if you guys can kind of read the question, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but we're talking about the effectiveness of bottle deposit programs and, just obviously ladders up to general EPR. Now, from my understanding, this type of getting into the nitty gritty, and we'll be talking about this in finance today, is going to be handled in the national action plans at the national level. We're running EPR dialogues here in the US. OPLN's official position, we hold these neutral convenings, so we're not taking an official position on what's good or what's bad. We're really trying to hold the space for these conversations and progress to happen between groups that are opposed. So just to answer that head on. But Nestle, we're specifically asking you, Jody, like how does, what's a position on bottle bills and EPR specifically for Nestle globally? And I think there was also a question about Nigeria and what is happening in Nigeria specifically with maybe this be an opportunity for you to sort of address, kind of globally your stance here.
Yeah, happy to. And I don't want to take too much time talking about Nestle's position. What I can say on a high level, our strategy is focused on redesigning packaging to reduce its scale and impact. It's focused on shifting how we design packaging to monomaterials and to alternate.
Oops, Jody just cut out for a second. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we got you. Yep, get back in. There you go.
Talking about my internet connection is unstable. My computer has now told me. So much for fiber optic.
You're good.
So looking at shifting to monomaterials, because one of the challenges, and a couple people made comments in the chat about the problem is we may have plastics that could be recycled and they're designed to be recycled, but it doesn't mean they're collected and recycled. And part of the solution of that is driving profit into the business of recycling. Too often plastic packaging isn't recycled. And one of the things that we're doing is making a shift into monomaterials. So single polymer plastics, typically clear or white, that are able to be recycled in more markets than not. And that's about driving money into the business of recycling and make it profitable for entrepreneurs to consider, do we want to build a recycling plant? In terms of collection, the question in Nigeria, it's harder for me to address that specifically here. But what I wanted to share is that we do have dozens of partnership programs to look at business models around collection and to partner with communities. Part of that work is, again, supporting shifting to monomaterials and creating collection and sorting systems that ultimately drive recycling in the end. But we're aware that our voluntary efforts can't do everything. And this is why we're working with partnerships. For example, the Consumer Goods Forum, where for the past year, we've been working together with them, not only for statements to support extended producer responsibility, and also to discuss topics like deposit return systems, which at least we are very supportive of. But additionally, to start looking at rules for how you design packaging. And one of the topics that maybe won't get a lot of coverage today is the golden design rules for sustainable packaging. 9 rules of how all companies can make smart choices about designing packaging so that that packaging has the opportunity to be recycled when it's put on market, or it's attractive for a recycler in another market. And this is about ensuring plastics don't end up in nature, because there's actually value in collecting them and in recycling them. And that's one of the fundamental changes that we need to make for any packaging that's intended for recycling. I guess on the last slide, I'll say, we also have over 20 pilots right now running in reuse, both in developed and in developing countries. And our goal is to create business models that are going to be viable to scale up in a larger way at the national level, so that ultimately we can be providing some of our products in reuse and working with other companies as well to expand the overall supply chains to support a reuse infrastructure. Because this can create thousands and thousands of jobs in logistics, jobs in collection, jobs in processing centers and bottling centers. So I hope that I don't want to take up too much time answering these questions, but I hope that that can respond to the chat questions. And if anyone has more questions, they can of course write to me directly.
Well, thank you so much, Jody. And all right, the chat is on fire over here. That is what we like. And we're just going to get right into it. Awa from Greenpeace, thanks for your question. How about the waste colonialism being witnessed in the global South, with global North corporations and EU governments dumping their waste in developing countries and yet pushing for global green agreements at the global level? How do we make sure to bring environmental justice, racial justice to these communities with the Global Plastic Treaty? A lot of greenwashing happening. How do we move away from that? Why don't we, Aaron and John, if you could just sort of dive in. And I mean, we did want to talk about some of the sort of overarching international agreements. This could be an opportunity to talk about Basel. Like, let's get into it. John, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, this is one where we don't need to wait for a global plastic treaty. We can just actually implement the treaty that we've already got, which is the Basel Agreement. And some countries, including the U.S., have yet to fully implement Basel, and that's something that we can do very quickly. The treaty already exists, so now we just need to do our jobs.
Thank you, John. Aaron, any thoughts, and we'll let Jody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty evident that there's a gap in policy right now that needs to be addressed, right? I think John is right, we need to get Basel right too, but it sets in these important standards for the transport of waste and transparency and chain of custody, which I think will definitely incentivize driving better changes and being better managers of these resources, which we're calling waste and we're selling off. But we don't have standards yet for responsible production or disposal of waste. And that's not even just for plastics, that's for all, right? And nor do we have for how nations of different capacities handle the colossal amount of waste that we're generating. And so I think that there's this opportunity right now where the global treaty can ensure put together standards around processing waste and effectively, safely managing it. But I think there's a chance to get out ahead and thinking about just being more thoughtful about how we're choosing these materials. And I'm going to speak holistically here because plastics is at the forefront of this, but I'm seeing a whole bunch of LCA comments in the chat, and it's really, we should be having the same considerations for all materials, right? We need to be taking these things responsibly from the planet in a way that allows us to that for them to be sourced renewably, not, not draining finite resources. And we need to be designing them thoughtfully to be using just what we need and be innovating for, solutions that don't require single use, moving as much into these reusable solutions, and then to still get that same value for protection, lightweighting, safety, et cetera. And then we need to be making sure that anything we're putting, that comes back, right? Whether that's being reused, whether that's through recycling, which requires infrastructure and requires legislation and financing, or, even for some materials into compost where that makes sense, right? And so I think that there's just, as this plastic pollution, it just continues to pile up on our shores, we need to have the policy and we need to be taking in parallel the steps to be rethinking the way we're using the materials in the first place. So we don't have to wait, as John said, there's opportunity now to be making changes, but there's going to be a great opportunity for the global treaty to sort of fill the gap where Basel has really set a great stage for us to start building transparency and to build off of that to make sure that, we're not overwhelming countries that don't have the waste management to, drop our trash there, that we're making sure that we're making that circle that we're trying to close much smaller in the first place, and that we are being efficient with that and not shipping materials all over the world, and just recycling them, reusing them here or, where they're being produced.
Oh, thanks so much, Erin. And we're just about at time. So there's a million amazing questions and we're just not going to be able to get to them because we got to get everybody to breakout groups. But I do want to give Jody an opportunity to comment specifically on this concept of waste colonialism and the Western world shipping their waste to the developing world and the implications there. And I don't know if there's an opportunity too for you to put your international trade hat on here, Jody, as well in this. And we're actually going to wrap too. So any final thoughts we appreciate.
I mean, I think if we look at the issue of waste trade, shipping mixed waste that's unsorted around the world is in the interest of few. Shipping clean waste that's compliant with the Basel Convention, that is destined for recycling in a facility from a country that doesn't have a recycling facility to one that does, makes a lot of sense in the short term. But in the long term, we need to be looking at broader systemic solutions that are supporting reuse or supporting refill. And I completely agree with John's point that we don't need to wait for a UN global treaty for national action to take place. And that's where the opportunity for all of us who are working at the national level to take action today, whether it's in dialogue with governments about what they can do, whether that's minimum government procurement for recycled content and materials that they're buying, creating markets like we saw the German government do over a decade ago with their requirements for recycled paper. They created a market overnight through government procurement. That's an opportunity. We also see an opportunity from the WTO perspective with some of the innovation that's happening around the WTO ecosystem, looking at HS codes for the import and export of goods, not only to track packaging when it's being transported empty across borders, but looking at tracking packaging once it has a product in it and it's crossing a border again. Right now, packaging disappears once it has a product in it. And the proposed revisions of the HS codes that are starting to be discussed in Geneva would actually give us visibility on where products of different types are moving, what types of material volumes are arriving, and again, where is the opportunity to create recycling businesses or reuse businesses as a result. If I look at the big picture, given we're close on time, I think one of the commonalities for me that's come out of this conversation is we all want to see a future where there's no landfilling and certainly there's no pollution in the environment. Where we sit is we're looking at our net zero commitment for 2050 and all the different measures we can take to address our scope 1, scope 2, and 3 emissions. And this summer in the Northern Hemisphere, winter in the Southern Hemisphere has certainly brought the reality of climate change to many people personally, whether that's stronger storms, the fires, the hurricanes, the floods, the droughts, the heat waves. Our weather is changing and getting weirder faster than ever. And climate stability is key for everyone, not just companies that produce and sell food. We all depend on the climate to survive. And so the question for me moving forward is, how can we as a diverse group with a variety of perspectives find ways to work together at the global level, but particularly at the national level, and have conversations with our representatives so that ultimately we can get better policy moving forward now at the national level and then supported at the global level by a treaty. And I think that's the interesting question to discuss as we shift to the breakout sessions and join these conversations about how in these individual topical areas can we identify key themes to make progress on.
Thank you so much, Jody. John and Aaron, do you want to do like a 20-second checkout, and we're going to pass it over to John Ehrman at Meridian Institute. Aaron, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Jody. Great comments. These are great questions, just following the chat, trying to get my thoughts in order. But I think I guess my wrapping up comments around this would be that I feel like this, what we're trying to discuss here, how we're trying to prioritize, how each stakeholder like leans in on this and plays an important part in moving us forward, is to just continue to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we've all come to the table because we believe that change needs to happen, that the trajectory we're on is not good, that and so while there is not all full alignment on how we get there, I love the conversations that are being had and the questions that we're asking about what are the key mechanisms we can push for right now? What are the actions that we as institutions in each of our own places within influence of the value chain or as a part of the value chain that we can do today to help reduce our impact of plastic waste in the future? So thank you for the great questions. If there are any questions that you all have for WWF, please feel free to reach out to me personally. If not, I look forward to the discussions in the breakout rooms as we dig into some of these sticky issues a bit more. So I'll hand back over to you, John.
Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, similarly, happy to follow up with anyone on all of these questions after. I mean, look, I think we all share a sense of urgency here, and it's not just about dolphins and turtles. This is about human beings. This is about, it's a global problem that requires a global treaty. We've largely been trying voluntary approaches for a while, and clearly they're falling short. Ultimately, we're going to have to be talking about source reduction. We're going to be we have to talk about shifting away from single-use to reusable and package-free approaches. We can't just replace throwaway plastic with some other throwaway material. This is a more systemic problem than that.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for the chat that is on fire. And I really apologize that we couldn't get to everyone, because we could literally keep this going for probably the rest of the time allocated. But now's a really amazing time to shift over to our breakout groups, which the feedback we got from the March sessions, it was the most powerful piece. So, again, we're so excited and grateful to have our partners at Meridian Institute and John Ehrman. John, take it away. And thank you so much, John, Aaron, and Jody.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful panel and great stimulation for what we're going to do next year. So I'm just going to make a few transition comments before we send you off to your breakout groups. First of all, many of you expressed preferences for breakout groups in your pre-registration process. So we've tried to get you into the groups that you preferenced, but there were some who didn't, and we've taken the liberty of assigning you to a group. The groups, we've done the best we can to have diversity of different perspectives in those groups. So let me remind you of some of the things Dave already touched on relative to our goals here today. We're not here to reach consensus. We're not asking you in a breakout group to come up with one view on what ought to happen in finance or markets or human rights and environmental justice. And I'll go over the topics lightly here in just a minute to remind you of what they are. We're here to hear a range of views and perspectives on what you think should be contained in a treaty to deal with the issue that you are talking about in your group. So I would also encourage you not to just discuss or debate the issue in a general sense, but what should the folks who are going to be negotiating this treaty be thinking about in terms of what the treaty should do to address this particular issue? Because of course, all of you could have, excellent discussions kind of in the abstract on each of these topics. They're all, as we just heard, they're complex. There's a range of views and we want to capture all that. But our particular focus here is start to building information for negotiators about what they should be looking at that should actually be contained in the provisions of the treaty. So your facilitators will try to help you keep that in mind as you go through the discussion. And as I say, facilitators, we do have facilitators assigned to each group. We have note-taking capacity in each group. So we will be taking notes for your conversations. As Dave said earlier, we are going to be capturing that information to put into a report, but we are operating here under Chatham House rules. So we're not going to be quoting anyone individually for your comments or perspectives that you're sharing. We will be capturing the general views of interest group sectors. You know, environmentalists are concerned about, you know, this part of industry is concerned about. But we're not going to be characterizing those associated with any organization or individual. So please take the time in your breakout groups to listen carefully, as Dave said, to understand the views of others. And Dave referred to positions. That's important, but also, you know, try to understand why someone has a particular view if you have an opportunity for a follow-up question, not just understanding their stated position. The facilitators are going to do their best to move you through a set of questions that are associated with each of these topics. We do have a couple groups where there will be translation for our Portuguese colleagues in the breakout groups, and that'll be happening sequentially in the breakout groups, not simultaneously. So those are in those groups. Just be aware you're going to need to pause and give time for that translation process to take place. But we're so excited to have our Portuguese speaking colleagues with us as part of this discussion today. And thanks again to Sonia and others for making that happen. If you do need to drop out, we're going to go for about 40 minutes in the breakouts, and we'll give a 5-minute warning. Every breakout group, we've got a 5-minute warning notice. If you do need to leave during the break, you know, we don't walk away from your computer. Please don't sign out of Zoom, just stay on, because if you sign out, then it makes it more complicated for us to assign you to the next round of breakouts. Everyone is going to have 2 topics that you've been assigned to. And again, we apologize that we don't have time for everyone to talk about every issue, but we've tried to diversify as much as we can and give you 2 opportunities to talk about those 2 different topics through the next hour and a half or so. So the plan is to just here in a second, we will send you off to breakouts. If you find yourself not assigned and you're still sitting in this plenary room, some of us will be there to help get you assigned to a breakout. So it's difficult to pre-assign everyone when we have not an absolute sense of who was going to be on today, but hopefully most of you will immediately go to your breakout with your facilitator and note taker. But if you're sitting in the plenary, we'll get you into a group as quickly as possible. And we are going to be recording the breakouts similar to this session, but again, that's just for our note-taking purposes. That recording is not going anywhere else outside of the OPLN Meridian world. So again, and the other thing I would say is we want this to be an opportunity for you to get to know other folks in your group. We're not going to take time for long introductions or probably any introductions because we want to, but as you're talking, you know, that'll give you an opportunity to explain to folks in your group what you do, where you come from, why you have the perspectives that you have. So kind of roll that into your discussion rather than taking time to go around the room. We've tried to keep the groups to about 10 or 12 per group. So hopefully that'll give you a chance for a pretty interactive discussion, and the facilitators will be encouraging everyone to speak. So please be concise and clear in your comments, and maybe most of all, listen carefully to what your colleagues are sharing and when they have a chance to speak. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleague Holly, and who's the master control here, to send you into your breakouts. And we will see you back here in about 40 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break. Then we'll hear some quick highlights from your discussions that I'll be asking individuals just to share some key insights and lessons learned, and then we'll send you into the second round of breakouts.
Yeah, I see everyone's coming back. So great to see you all back in here. You know, I just want to take a few minutes to kind of debrief the breakout you were just in. And so, you know, I would love to hear from people. What is one thing you learned or were surprised by in your breakout group? So if you can share that in the chat, and Meredith will, okay, great. Thanks, Meredith. We'll put that in the chat. So what is one thing you learned or were surprised by in your breakout group? Or just, you know, if you have general thoughts and reflections, and we'd love to hear that too. Meredith, anything at all.
Everybody's slowly coming back in the beginning of the break.
Yeah, I'll give you a few minutes to think about that.
There you go. You must have something to say. What'd you learn? What surprised you?
Well, I'm working on it. I was just putting something in the chat, but the one thing that we didn't reach a conclusion on, but caught my attention was just the issue of virgin plastic production competing with what we need to do to succeed, and how to address that. If you have virgin plastic out competing reuse, recycling, compostability, that's not going to help drive investments into these other activities.
Great. A lot of good things coming in the chat, but others who want to verbalize something. We just have a couple minutes here as we allocate you into your next round of breakout groups. So.
Seems like there's a lot of social justice epiphanies that happened in these conversations, which is amazing.
Yeah, good honesty. That's nice to see. I felt heard. I'm glad.
I feel a higher level of conversation since the last dialogues. Happy for that. Yeah, so yeah, lots of people aren't speaking up, especially women. It's a good point, Kelly. Yeah, let's make sure we create space for everyone to talk.
Yeah, I know from talking to a couple of the facilitators, at least, there's some people who are just feeling a little uncomfortable, I think, speaking for their organization. But, this is Chatham House rule. It's off the record. So please feel free to share your views. And if you want to characterize your view as your personal view and not that of your organization, feel free to do that. So just want to encourage everybody to engage as much as possible as we go into the next groups here in a few minutes. But other things that surprised you, things you thought you might hear that you didn't hear, or questions you still have on your mind. I was in one group that said, these focused questions are great, but we've got some other issues we could be talking about under this topic, which we certainly welcome. So if there were topics that you thought of under finance or marketing or environmental justice, health, et cetera, that you didn't get a chance to talk about, this would be a minute to flag those so we can make sure we focus on those in subsequent discussions.
Paula Alexander, would you be willing to come?
Well, it looks like Awa from Greenpeace looks like she put up her hand, Dave.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, go ahead, Awa, please.
Yeah, so actually I want to speak as Awa, as a woman from the Global South. So I think and I've shared basically also a recent blog that I was writing around the issue of waste colonialism and all. I think, given the circumstances that we are facing now with COVID and how, coming back to the basics of solidarity, just relating as human beings has been so essential in trying to, be resilient with this COVID makes me think as a human being that we just need to, be that caring for the nature and build back better by ensuring that we don't reproduce the same mistakes. And a lot of this has to also relate to, it has to do with how Global South and Global North also relate in terms of, going through these green agreements and policies. So for me, as a plastic and oceans campaigner, knowing how female fish processors in West Africa as doing all they can to survive, to ensure and provide for their families. They don't care about these high-level discussions. What they need is an ocean that is going to give them chance to, get the resources available and support their families. So this global plastic treaty for me should be a way to bring back justice by empowering communities affected by plastic waste and basically advocate for their inclusion in local decision making and also in those global spaces because they're lacking representativity in there. So to wrap up, for me, it's also about recognizing traditional ecological knowledge, the indigenous expertise and experience in nature conservations, whether it's plastic pollution or whether it is about maintaining a marine protected area, for the, for the sake of their communities. So let's just be humans and try to take the chance with this global treaty to move away from greenwashing and false solutions to the plastic crisis. Over and out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Got time for one or two other comments if anyone wants to share. Important aspects you heard, things you didn't think were addressed that you want to make sure this process gets to in the future.
May I
Yeah,
say
please.
something?
Yeah, Ralph, please.
Yeah,
welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a bit of a emergency. I couldn't log on before.
No problem. Glad you're
so I've been at the IMF for 23 years. I've worked in the policy space quite a bit, worked on fragile states a lot. But more importantly for our purposes, perhaps I work on valuation of natural capital as to our economic well-being and to our economic systems. I just want to key off of the nice sentiment by my colleague who just came before me. A part of the solving, I'm not a plastics expert, so I'm coming at it from a financial economics point of view, is it takes two to commit a good thing or a bad thing. So if there's dumping of that plastics in developing countries because somebody at the other end is receiving it, either accepting it or not knowing the impact of what they're accepting. So part of fixing the problem, because I believe in incentives, is to actually educate the recipient countries as to the value of their nature to them. For example, I valued the carbon services of whales. I valued the carbon services of elephants. I valued the carbon services of seagrass, salt marsh, mangroves, and other natural capital. To not intrinsically, of course, all creatures are intrinsically priceless. I'm talking in terms of ecosystem services that are of relevance to our economic systems. So let's take, for example, a developing country or a low-income country that is subject to dumping of plastics. If we were to go into that country and show them how valuable their mangrove forests are, how valuable their seagrass are in terms of carbon sequestration, because everybody's now focused on climate change. So they can sell the carbon services, not the asset itself, the services of these assets to the world. Next time some first world country wants to dump in their waters, they'll say, don't come here. Why? Well, because our mangroves, seagrass, salt marshes, kelp forests are very, very precious to us. They provide livelihood for us. So you're not going to come here and destroy it for a few bucks that you're going to pay someone to do so. So what you're really doing here, you're providing information that is valuable and capacity development to these countries, so that the countries that are in the knowing but committing that crime of dumping can be stopped. Because what I listened to when I finally was able to log on, I only heard about what we should be doing as the dumpers, what we shouldn't be doing. But you really want the other side of the coin, which is to say, you can't come here because now I'm informed. I know how valuable my nature is, my natural assets are, and I can create wealth for my people that is not extractive wealth, but is actually regenerative wealth, meaning it's a gift that keeps on giving. So you're not allowed to come here and dump willy-nilly as you like. Now, what that would do, because it's not only about that, is from us, it creates incentives. It forces us to endogenize the price, the true price of pollution. Because right now we're getting away. That's why we produce plastics one use, because no one is pricing the fact that you're not using reusable. It's the private profit is not shared, excuse me, but the cost is shared by everybody. What you really want to do is push that back onto the producer of the harm and let them internalize the cost of that, which causes them to basically raise the prices, which forces people to reuse what they have rather than dump it and make it single use. I mean, there's so many ways to do this in a constructive way, in a way doesn't shame, doesn't put anybody, but works together to create a better economy. Now, as for the plastics themselves, what I was discussing in my group is, look, suppose an area has been harmed due to dumping of plastics. I have a proposal for you. We can come to that area and say, what did we have before plastics arrived? Perhaps we had mangroves.
Ralph, I just want to. We do need to get into our next round of breakouts.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sorry you weren't in at the.
No, it's okay. It's my fault, not yours.
No, it's great. You lots of positive response in the chat about what you're sharing, and I would encourage others to build on what Ralph is saying.
John, real quick too, Ralph,
yeah.
We've been talking about this earlier, but our next session is going to be aligned with COP, and we're going to be specifically talking about oceans and climate coming together. And we'd love to offer you an opportunity to expand on this and in a much deeper way in November. So thank you so much.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again, Ralph. And thanks everybody for sharing your thoughts and keep them coming in the chat. Holly, are we ready to send people to the next round of breakouts? Holly or Annie, can hear me?
Hello, we're ready.
Great. So what we've done in the next round, we've tried to do the best we can to get you your second preference, but because of, there've been lots of people coming and going who registered for this, you may or may not be exactly where you thought you want to be on your second round, but wherever you are, I'm sure it'll be an interesting conversation. If you really have a serious problem about where you are, come back out to the plenary and we'll put you into a different group. But we thought it'd be interesting to be a little more, to mix you up a little bit as we go into the second round. So the topics are the same set of topics. The questions are the same. We'll just have about 30 minutes for this session. Just given the richness of what we've all been talking about so far, and then we'll come back and Aaron will lead us through some closing comments from a guest. So with that, let's go ahead and ask Holly, please send people into the breakouts, and you should have your facilitator and note taker there, and they'll explain to you what your topic is if you're not in the topic you expect it to be. So thank you all, and let's keep the great conversation going.
Yeah, thank you so much. What's that?
I was just going to say, amazing to see everybody's faces. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we realize Zoom isn't perfect, and it's sometimes challenging to get everyone into the right breakouts. So we're grateful for your patience there. But hopefully you were able to have some fruitful discussions. So we don't have much time left, and we still have to get to a few guests. So I would like to kind of jump into the next part. So as we mentioned earlier, there will be a ministerial conference in September, led by representatives from Germany, Vietnam, Ecuador, and Ghana. And we're honored to have here some representatives leading from both Ecuador and the Ghana side. So first, I would like to introduce Walter Schultz, who is leading the effort from Ecuador. And Walter, if you could put yourself off mute, and we'd love to hear your remarks.
Thank you so much, Erin, and very, very glad to see so many very important representatives, stakeholders, and country representatives as well here. Also very glad that my colleague Oliver Bohi from Ghana is also taking part of this event. So just to thank again the OPLN and Greenpeace and WWF for the invitation. As you mentioned, our 4 countries, Germany, Ecuador, Vietnam, and Ghana, we have announced this calling or process towards the Ministerial Conference on September 1st and 2nd, with a very strong support from the UNEP and also the presidency of UNEA, under, as some of you know, or most of you know, under Norway presidency right now, to just to fill the gap that was left, if you want, and it has been appreciated in that manner. Because of the pandemic, postponement of several processes, including UNEA meeting as well, but also to build upon the work of the opening expert group that was very important. But since we haven't been meeting and there has been no more concrete follow-up on how to really make use of all of these efforts, instruments, regulations that we have at different levels. And put everything together in a comprehensive framework, such as a global treaty or global agreement, taking also into account that there are more and more clear political will to move into that direction from what we have seen, and also from different actors also. We organized these 2 pre-meetings, one on the 27th and 28th of May, and the second one on the 28th and 29th of May. And I think it was very, very also encouraging to have the attendance of around 300 participants in the first one, and a similar number in the second one, perhaps with fewer numbers. Around more than 100 countries, governments represented there. We address different issues, but also very from the starting point of a common, what should be the common goal, vision, and objectives of the potential global or future agreement. We also had a facilitation from Sweden and Kenya on that. In that first sort of a stream of that first pre-meeting, it was clear the coincidence around the need to establish a global instrument or agreement to address both the prevention and also the reduction of marine litter and plastic pollution, the issues of the consideration of the full life cycle of plastics, the need to build upon the existing initiatives rather than duplicate or start something from scratch, the need to have also science as basis for any decision making, the need for assistance for the developing countries, for the implementation of future agreement, and also the importance of the broad participation of all stakeholders. We also addressed in that same first pre-meeting the issues of data monitoring and reporting that was facilitated by Russia and Seychelles. Also, the issue of science came very strong as the basis for data monitoring and reporting measures. The importance of harmonization and a standardized methodology to allow comparability of data, but also to take into account the different capacities of different countries and circumstances as well. The need to promote collaboration and cooperation at different levels, and which actually was an issue addressed in the second pre-meeting. Finally, on that first pre-meeting, we also addressed the issue of marine litter and plastic pollution measures through the life cycle approach, trying to give more granularity to the life cycle approach aspect or approach. The different elements also came out there, including the issue of human rights, gender, indigenous people, community impacts from plastic pollution. On the second pre-meeting on June, we addressed the issue of national and regional cooperation that was coordinated by the US and Argentina, facilitated, and also the issue of financial technical support. I don't have time to elaborate more on the details of or the main messages from those second pre-meeting, but to explain or the process from our point of view at least is that after the results or the main messages that we gather from those 2 pre-meetings is the basis for what has been circulated as the key messages for the Ministerial Conference. I'm sure most of you have seen, but if not, I encourage you to look at those key messages as what we call a zero draft. We don't expect to have a negotiation of a full detail as it would have been in a resolution, because the whole conferential ministerial conference is to really build and the consensus and consolidate the political support towards UNEA 5.2, where we really would like to have a concrete mandate for a process of negotiation of a future treaty. And we think we have the good basis for that. In any case, I take this opportunity to encourage you to participate in different capacities, because the conferential ministerial conference is going to be open for government and other stakeholders participation. It's going to be in a hybrid format in Geneva on September 1st and 2nd. The first day more on a sort of an update of a recent progress on the issue of marine plastic pollution, marine litter and plastic pollution, a summary of the discussions of the outcomes of the ministerial pre-meetings that I've mentioned in May and June, and a second day more of with a high-level segment to try to aim to this purpose or objective of consolidating the political consensus that is needed to move towards a concrete mandate to the resume session of UNEA 5. The key messages are again a basis of what we consider should be the ground and what we have heard from the governments and other stakeholders during this preparatory process. But of course, it can be improved. So any contribution on that, there is when this was circulated, there was a link also for any comments or proposals to improve it.
Awesome. Walter, yeah, I know it's a lot to get through.
This is
Yeah.
perhaps the whole purpose of this intervention, and thank you again.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate your comments, and I know we're at time, so those that had to jump, that's okay. Thank you so much, Walter, for all your work in getting us to the ministerial conference. I also want to bring up briefly Oliver Bochi from Ghana. And Oliver, just to get a minute or two on kind of your perspective on the process. Oh, you're on mute, Oliver. There you go.
Thank you very much, Eric. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to make a few remarks, at this meeting. Now, in anticipation of the pending ministerial conference in September, I think the need for platforms like this for us to really engage stakeholders and get different perspectives of what we are trying to do is extremely important. And I want to thank OPLN for the work that you are doing, because this is exactly what we need in preparation towards the conference. Now, at this meeting in particular, there are two things that I have picked up, and I wanted to just make a comment or two about them. The first one has to do with the concern that corporate entities will be lobbying, to either not make this global treaty, become a reality, or to weaken the tenets of it to the extent that it will be business as usual. What we need to understand is that, one, this conference that we are planning for September 1st and 2nd is just to, first of all, bring stakeholders together to package something that will contain all the components that are necessary for a treaty that will be enforceable and that will provide the resources for nations to be able to meet their obligations. That's the first one. And the second one is that they are just looking for an opportunity to create a negotiating committee. And I think once that has been achieved, all the various stakeholders, including the corporate bodies, the waste pickers and everybody, I think should be given the opportunity to be part of this negotiating team. And if you are able to do that, then in the end, what comes out of it will be something that everybody buys into. And I think that is very, very important.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to just mention has to do with what they call the waste colonialism. Again, it's the same issue. I've mentioned two things in breakout rooms. One is the creation of a scientific body that will establish the standards, as what I was just talking about, to ensure that we have, in the end, designers and producers coming up with products that are recyclable, so that we don't end up with the problems that we are having today. And also, there's going to be a fund set up with mechanisms to provide resources for countries that do not have the capacity to play their roles. And if you're able to do these two things, I think this treaty is going to be extremely helpful in helping nations and the world to be able to deal with the plastic menace. And so on that note, I want to thank you once again for the opportunity. And we encourage all of you to be part of the discussions that are going to take place at the conference. And hopefully we'll get the mandate from Union 5 to go ahead, negotiate, and come up with a treaty that will enable us to do the job that we have to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you for your time and being here, and thank you everyone for. I know we were over time, but thank you so much for joining our conversations today. We'll be writing a report that will be used to inform representatives at the coming meeting, and then in all stakeholders involved and here in this meeting. And briefly, just want to thank our Stewardship Council and Meridian for doing such an amazing job in the background here. And thank you for being on this journey with us. It's exactly that. It's a journey, and we're not perfect. We're not the experts. We see our role as bringing us, together, many of you, the stakeholders together, so that we can have a more complete picture of the challenge that lays before us. So knowing that there's so much work to be done and cannot wait for a global agreement to be reached, we encourage everyone to keep the dialogues going, join each other's events, keep learning from each other, ask questions, build bridges, and keep up this momentum. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day. We'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, guys.
No.